Welcome to the Kenoi Church Podcast. We're glad that you're interested in connecting through this teaching time. If you'd like to connect further, feel free to reach out to us through our website, kenoichurch.org. For now, enjoy this teaching from Kenoi Church, where our mission is to lead people into a growing relationship with Jesus Christ.
We're finally here. This is the day, the end. All right? It's a little tongue-in-cheek because it's the last day of Daniel, so it's the end. But also, it's tongue-in-cheek because the end of Daniel actually talks about the end, right? Like the end of days, the end, okay? We're doing 2 chapters today, Daniel 11 and Daniel 12. So if you want to get out your Bibles, you want to open up, you kind of want to follow along, that's where you're going to be. Daniel 11, Daniel 12. 11's super long. 12's pretty short. 11 consists of a prophetic word about the future from Daniel's perspective, okay? So Daniel gets this vision. Remember last week we were in Daniel 10. Daniel has this dream, this vision, and he's really upset by it. Right? That's what we talked about. We said we're not talking about the vision. What we do know, Daniel's upset, like sick to his stomach about the vision. Well, today we're talking about the vision, okay? So 11's talking about part of the vision, and it's from Daniel. It's in Daniel's future, but 11 is really in our past, okay? So it's looking forward from Daniel, but looking back for us. So Daniel's future, our past. And 12 is looking forward in the future for Daniel and forward into the future for us. All right, you with me? 11's past for us, future for Daniel. 12 is future for Daniel, future for us. Okay? Now, we're not going to be able to go verse by verse today. You just can't do it. It's too long, too much, too many verses to go verse by verse. But we can get a really good sense of the vision that Daniel had that bothered him so much, and I think you're going to see why it bothered him so much. So, we're going to jump in. Let's get started. Here is the very beginning. Like I said, because Daniel 11 is our past, there's going to be some history-ish lesson-sounding stuff today. So if you like history, it might sound fun and kind of like a treat for you. If you don't like history, maybe a little snoozy fest for you. I'll try to make it as fun as possible for you. This is all future for Daniel, though. And that's the thing that you have to remember. It's future for Daniel. Remember that Daniel came from a place called Judah. He got taken out of Judah. He got taken to a place called Babylon, and he lived through the entire Babylonian regime. Then the Medes took over. He lived through the entire regime of the Medes. Then the Persians took over, and he lived through the Persians being king, right? So verse 2, when we open up Daniel 11, tells us that there's going to be 3 more kings and then a 4th. So, how far into the future is Daniel 11? 4 more Persian kings. And then that 4th king is going to be super rich, and that 4th king will kind of come to power through his wealth, and that 4th king is going to stir up trouble with a country called Greece. And that should sound familiar to you. If you've been here through the Daniel series, Persia and Greece, those 2 countries should ring a bell for us, okay? Because we've already talked about these 2 kingdoms. Daniel chapter 8, if you remember, Daniel had a dream. He had a vision about the future, and there were 2 animals in that dream, a ram and a goat. You guys remember? What happened in that? Let's look. Here it is. I have it on the screen for you. It says, I saw, this is the goat. I saw it attack the ram furiously, striking the ram and shattering its 2 horns. The ram was powerless to stand against it. The goat knocked it to the ground and trampled on it, and none could rescue the ram from its power. So the ram is Persia, the goat is Greece. And in chapter 8, Daniel has a dream already about these 2 countries going to war. right? And the ram cannot even withstand it. Persia can't withstand it. Greece is too mighty, too great, too powerful, and he knows already what's going to happen when they go to war. So Greece destroys Persia. What's chapter 11 say? We'll jump back to chapter 11. Verse 3. A mighty king will arise who will rule with great power and do as he pleases. What's chapter 8 say? The shaggy goat is the king of Greece, and the large horn between its eyes is the first king. All right? So do you see how chapter 11, chapter 8, they're sort of intermixing, right? Right? They go together. It's like a zipper. When you start looking at them, they start to sort of line up. Okay, so let's put our historical eyes on for a second. Let's make some sense of this. When we look back on chapter 11, when we look back on the Persian Empire and the Greek Empire, when do we see them in history go to war? Well, it's this guy, Alexander the Great. Alexander the Great comes in and he conquers the Persian Empire. Okay? Biblical scholars look back on this. Historians look back on this. The Daniel text is extremely specific, and it lines up with history really well. In fact, it lines up with history so well that people who are critical of the Bible use it to say there's no way that it could have been written when it said it was written. Okay? That's how well it lines up. Okay? Alexander the Great is a great military leader. He comes in and he wipes out Persia, right? He created an empire that goes from India to Africa all the way to Greece. And he never makes it back home to Greece. In fact, he dies in Nebuchadnezzar's palace in Babylon. All right? That's where he dies. So in the place he conquers, right? What does Daniel's dream say? Let's go back to that. Verse 4 in chapter 11 says this: after he has arisen, his empire will be broken up and parceled out towards the four winds of heaven. It will not go out to his descendants, nor will it have the power he exercised, because his empire will be uprooted and given to others. That's what Daniel's vision says about this Greek leader that will come in and decimate Persia. How about chapter 8? What's chapter 8 say? The goat became very great, but at the height of its power, the large horn was broken off, and in its place, 4 horns grew upward toward the 4 winds of heaven. Okay. So, our zipper, right? Now let's check history. What happened with Alexander the Great? Well, he's in Babylon on his deathbed. What's the easiest thing for this great, powerful king with a massive empire to do when people come to him and say, you're dying, who will succeed you? Just name somebody. They'll inherit this entire empire. And what does Alexander the Great say? He is known for saying these words: my empire shall go to the strongest. So what do you think that leads to? A peaceful inheritance for one person? Of course not. It leads to 4 generals vying for power. Wait, did I just say 4? I did say 4. Like 4 little horns, right? That grew up in place of a big horn. 4 generals vying for power. That leads to 40 years of war. And the 40 years of war eventually leads to 2 main empires. So Alexander the Great's massive empire, okay, that stretches from India to Greece to Africa, is divided up in these 2 main empires. They're called the Seleucid Empire and the Ptolemaic Empire. The Ptolemaic Empire, well, I'll get into that in a second. If we look at the Bible in chapter 11, you'll see the Bible calls him king of the north and south, right? Remember, when Daniel's having the vision, this is all future stuff, right? So in chapter 11, in the vision, it says king of the north, king of the south. When we, with our future goggles, look back on history, we realize that main person that grew up as the horn, that's Alexander the Great. horn breaks off. 4 little horns. The generals. King of the north and the south. Oh, with my future goggles, I can name those. It's not the king of the north and the king of the south. Future goggles tell me Seleucid Empire, Ptolemaic Empire, right? So the Bible calls these one thing from history, from my standpoint, because what am I? I'm basically a time traveler right now, right? I'm in the future. I can look back. Seleucid Empire, Ptolemaic Empire. So the Bible calls them one thing, but we know them as 2 different things because we are in the future. Now, do you realize we've only done 4 verses? This is why we can't go verse by verse by verse by verse this morning. We're literally at chapter 11, verse 4. But do you see how incredibly detailed the vision is? Do you see how when we put our future goggles on and we look back at it and we look at the details of this vision, it lines up? It's no wonder that people who are critical of the Bible actually use this and use the details to go, there is no way that this could have been written before this happened. This had to have been written after all this happened, and they pretend that it was a vision of the future, okay? Because it's so detailed and all of that. The Seleucid and the Ptolemaic empires are eventually going to be adopted by something called the Roman Republic. And the Roman Republic is something that will eventually be called the Roman Empire. All right? Now, this is going to be easy for me to show this way. I don't know if you can see that very well. This is the top of Africa. All right? Egypt. All right? The Ptolemaic Empire is in Egypt. Okay? The last ruler in the Ptolemaic Empire is somebody that everybody here knows because she's famous. Cleopatra. Okay? The Seleucid Empire is all that blue, that way, going over to Asia. All right? Now, hard to see on this map. Best map I could find, though. What's in the middle, right there, between Egypt and Western Asia, right? Yes! Who said that? Right there. Say it louder. Jerusalem, right? What we would call like the Holy Land is right there in the middle. So, the Ptolemaic Empire and the Seleucid Empire are going to battle for generations and generations. They hate each other, okay? These are the 2 empires that come out of Alexander the Great's empire, and they're going to go to war over and over and over for generations and generations and generations and generations. And I want you to think in your head, I want you to literally picture 2 giants. Imagine Goliath versus Goliath, okay? And they're fighting in a field. Who gets the worst of Goliath versus Goliath fighting in a field? The field. Right? The bugs and the grass and the flowers. The field does. Who's the field in the Seleucid versus the Ptolemaic Empire? Jerusalem is right in the middle. All the time. So for generations, as they go to war, as they go to battle, Israel is stuck right in the middle of these 2 fighting and fighting and fighting. And so what does chapter 11 tell us? It tells us the story of the king in the north and the king in the south, which is really these 2 great empires going to war over and over and over. It tells us of alliances and betrayals and wars and battles. And who suffers the most? The landscape does. Now, if we look a bit further into Daniel chapter 11, go to around verse 21, okay? And this is where you're going to see an important figure get named. And I want to draw your attention to this because, again, I'm not reading verse by verse. I'm trying to give you a good summation of the chapter. But 21 is going to bring out a really important character in chapter 11. And again, it's another character. When I put my future goggles on, we can look back into the past and go, we think we know that person. I got you laughing, and that's what I'm going for because I'm trying to make history fun this morning. All right. Look, here's what it says in chapter 11, verse 21. It talks about the rise of another great leader. So look at 21. It says, there's a contemptible person, and this is going to be a person who's not given the honor of royalty, which means somehow they're going to become king, but it's not like a direct lineage, not father to son sort of thing, okay? So not really given the honor of royalty. They're going to use their power to invade other kingdoms when they feel secure. What else does it say? There's an overwhelming army that's swept away in front of them. So like great winner of battles. They're going to destroy covenants. You can't trust them. What else? They act deceitfully, okay? And verse 24, he's going to achieve what neither his fathers nor his forefathers did, all right? So there's this character that's coming up in 11, 21 to 24. That's a really important character for us to take a note of. Who is this character in history? And here's another person that historians and biblical scholars have honed in on and say, we're really in agreement about who this is. It's this dude, Antiochus IV Epiphanes. We've actually talked about this guy in church already. I can't remember when. I just know we did. Because I've told you a little bit about the Maccabean rebellion, but I don't remember in what context I told you about that in. So, who is this guy? The Seleucid Empire, he's way bigger than the Ptolemaic Empire, okay? And they did some stuff over the generations that they existed where they tried to attack Greece and they wanted to make Greece part of the empire, but the Republic of Rome, which is not the Roman Empire yet, it's much smaller, okay? But they're getting powerful. Rome has got some to it, okay? I don't know how to say that in a different way. But I can say it in a different way, just not appropriate. They've got some stuff to them, okay? And so they hook up with Greece and they defeat the Seleucid Empire. And what they do is they say, Seleucid Empire, you have to pay war reparations. And that, they hold it to them. And it almost breaks the Seleucid Empire financially, paying these war reparations back. And it breaks the king, okay? The king's got nothing left. The people don't like the king because financially the empire's almost broke. Now, let's go back to this guy. This guy's not even a direct descendant to be the king. His cousin is. His cousin takes the throne, and his cousin somehow gets assassinated. And then this guy gets the throne. This guy decides, Antiochus IV Epiphanes decides, that he's going to reclaim all the glory of the Seleucid Empire in some way, shape, or form. But he's smart enough to know that the campaigns that they used to wage against places like Greece and Rome and all of that, that's a dumb idea because they can't beat those guys. But who could they fight? And who will the people support him in fighting? Oh, I know. How about the age-old enemy that they fought for generations and generations, the Ptolemaites. And so he does what nobody else could ever do. What does the scripture say? What does Daniel's vision say? He's going to do something that none of his fathers and forebears could do, right? He beats the Ptolemaic Empire all the way back to Alexandria, right there in Egypt. He beats them all the way back into Africa. He corners them there. And he has his massive army encamped right there, and he is just camped outside the city with his army. And he's just sitting there, and he's like, I got him cornered. I'm going to destroy the empire. All of them are going to be gone. They're dead. I'm going to finally win this generational battle that we've had forever. I just got to figure out how I'm going to do it. I'm going to invade. I'm going to slaughter them. What am I going to do? Poison them? He's just trying to figure out what he's going to do. And Rome gets wind. The Roman Senate gets wind. The Roman Senate takes a vote. And they say, you know what? The Roman Republic would really like to annex the Ptolemaic Empire into Rome. It doesn't work for us, for the Seleucids to destroy them. So they send a whole bunch of people to tell them that. If you destroy them, you go to war with us. Well, Antiochus, the fourth Epiphanes, knows better than to go to war with Rome. So he says, okay, I won't do it. But he's bitter. He's angry. He is so angry that when he goes home, he has to pass through, what's the magic city? Jerusalem. And when he gets there, he is going to do some really nasty, awful, terrible things. So let's go back to our dream, because you're probably saying, Nick, history, okay, well, how does this tie into anything? I'm going to tell you right now. Verse 30, here's what it says, okay? It says, first, the chapter 11 talks about how this guy's going to get stopped. He's going to be opposed, okay? That's what the verse 30 here is saying. He's going to be opposed, and he will lose heart. Then he will turn back. This is him turning back now. And he's going to vent his fury against the holy covenant. He will return and show favor to those who forsake the holy covenant. His armed forces will rise up to desecrate the temple fortress and will abolish the daily sacrifice. Then they will set up the abomination that causes desolation. With flattery, he will corrupt those who have violated the covenant. But the people who know their God will firmly resist him. In history, I got my goggles on, right? In history, Antiochus, the fourth Epiphanes, came to Jerusalem, and he just gave his soldiers carte blanche freedom to slaughter Jews. They took the city by force. They slaughtered unclean animals in the temple. They put up idols in the temple. They outlawed Jewish worship. They desecrated the holy places. They tried to force Hellenistic Greek religion on the Jews, and they kept it that way for years. This led to the Maccabean rebellion, where a number of Jews, led by Judas Maccabees, took to the hills outside of Jerusalem, formed guerrilla warfare troops, eventually took back Jerusalem, cleansed the temple, beat the Seleucids out. And part of what Hanukkah celebrates is the cleansing of the temple. They waged a multi-year campaign, a multi-year war for the Jews to regain their independence. The Jews eventually make an alliance with the Roman Republic in order to maintain their independence. And within 100 years of making that alliance, the Roman Republic would have a terrible civil war and become the Roman Empire. And then the people that they made their alliance with would be the people that would oppress them in Jerusalem. That's chapter 11. Do you get why Daniel has a sick feeling in his stomach as he sees a vision? All that his people are going to go through. All of the turmoil. I mean, the place that Daniel lives is Persia, essentially, right? It's Babylon taken over by Persia. There's 4 more kings, and then Persia is going to be wiped off the map. And then that king is going to be wiped out. And then it's going to be constant upheaval. My stomach would be sick too. But perhaps the thing that makes it even sicker is Daniel 12. Because Daniel 12 is all future, and it's all future for all of us too. It's no goggles for the past anymore, guys. We can't look back and go, oh, it's this person and this person and this person and this person, and we can make sense of it, because Daniel 12 is all about the future now. The chapter starts out in Daniel 12, and it says a couple of things. It says there's going to be a time of great distress. It predicts a time of terrible trouble. Trouble like we've never seen. Unprecedented trouble. And it's not trouble for just the Jews, because up at this point, Daniel might expect that. He might understand that. I mean, he's been captured from as a little kid. They've gone through terrible troubles as the Jewish people. But this is trouble for the entire world. It's trouble for everyone. And it's unprecedented trouble for the entire world. But, and it's a big but, Daniel's vision says those who follow God will be delivered. Wow. That's Not just a big but it's an important but for us to note, for us to hold on to, for us to cling to. Those who know God will be delivered. Verse 2 says that there's going to be a resurrection. That those who sleep in the dirt, in the dust, are going to rise to everlasting life. Some are going to rise to everlasting life. Some are going to rise to everlasting contempt. Those who are wise and lead others to righteousness are going to shine like the stars. Wow. So in this time of trouble, if you are a follower of God, you're set aside, you're saved, you're held on to. And if you have passed away before and you are part of the resurrection and you're someone who's wise or have led others to righteousness, you are different when you rise. You shine like the stars. There's a visible, clear difference to you when you rise. And then in verse 4, the angel says something to Daniel, something interesting. He says, Daniel, this prophecy isn't for now. It's not for today. God gave you these things. He sent an angel to explain them to you. Daniel, you're an old man. You're not going to see them. So just roll up the scroll. Save it for the future. Put it away. I mean, think about how much it bothered you, Daniel. Think about how much it made your stomach sick. Think about how hard it was for you to process these things. Roll up the scroll because this isn't for now. This is for the future. Your people have only just returned to Judah, Daniel. They've only just started to rebuild the temple. And your people are like the temple. They need rebuilding too. They've got to learn. They've got to grow. They're going to have to go here and there and understand and mature and grow. So roll up this prophecy. Put it away because it's not for here. It's not for now. And it's not going to be helpful right now. Seal it up for a time when it will be helpful. And I think you could get stuck on that, or you could put yourself in the shoes of a parent, or if you've ever acted in the role of a parent or a guardian or a mentor or a counselor, you could get this. You could understand this. Because as much as you might want to tell your kids everything right away, you can't, can you? Even when they ask the super awesome, totally deep, absolutely right question, you can't always give them the super awesome, totally deep, absolutely right answer when you want to. Because sometimes they have to grow up a little bit and they have to understand a little bit more. They have to be a little bit more mature before you can give them the answer you want to give them. Like, where do babies come from? Answering a 3-year-old and answering a 12-year-old are two different answers, right? Right, okay. The other night I was putting my kids to bed and my 5-year-old asked me, why didn't God just die on the cross instead of Jesus? Okay, my goodness. Like, that is like a philosophy 601 question. Do you know what I mean? Just think about that for a moment. Why didn't God die on the cross instead of Jesus? That's no joke, man. And I'm like in my head, like in the 30 milliseconds before I give an answer, I'm like, should I talk incarnation, atonement theories? Should I go Psalm 22, John 3:16, 1 John 3, 1 John 1, John 1? Should I take all those and put them together? Maybe she just wants to know how much daddies love their kids. Like, maybe that's just what this is. I don't know. Like, should I just kiss her and walk out of the room? Like, you know what I mean? Like, sometimes there's a really deep answer, a really cool, awesome conversation sort of answer you want to give your kids, but you can't give your kids that answer because they're not quite there and ready for it yet. Daniel, the scroll is not for right now. It's not helpful right now, Daniel. This scroll is for the future. Do you get it? Right. Like, when is it for? It's for the end. Why would this prophecy be helpful at the end? Because at the end, that's when I want to know God's going to save me. Like, at the time when the trouble is, when the great distress is, that's when I want to know God's stepping in. When worldwide affliction and distress and despair has come here, I want to know that my God is stepping in and I've been set aside. This prophecy is helpful, right? If I'm dust, right? If I have gone and I have died on my deathbed, as I close my eyes, if I take my last breath, as my heart beats my last beat, I want to know that there will be a resurrection, and on that resurrection, when I come back, I'm shining like the stars because I was wise and I helped lead others to righteousness. That's when this prophecy is helpful at the end, right? That is when this is helpful. Now look, we're not done with 12 yet, right? We're only part of the way through 12. And here's the thing. If you had an angel in front of you and he was just answering your questions carte blanche, I think you and I would be the same as Daniel. We'd ask a question, right? When we try to get in a question, Daniel gets in two. In chapter 6, in verse 6, he says, when will this happen? And in verse 8, he says, what will the outcome be, right? Well, in the answer to Daniel's initial question of when, the angel goes, a time, times, and half a time. Thanks. Right? And you know, because everybody likes to argue, Bible scholars argue over what in the world that means, like till they're blue in the face. So I can't tell you what that means. I don't think anybody knows. We just theorize. Some people think that time and times and half a times are like big chunks of time, and we like to do things with numbers. Some people think that means 3.5 years. Great. But here's the second thing he says. The angel does say one more thing, and this, I think, is really helpful, okay? The second thing the angel says is when the power of God's people is finally broken. Hold that for just a moment. I just just put that in your hands. Daniel says, when will this happen? And the angel says, when the power of God's people is finally broken. Okay. That makes me think of so many stories in Scripture, doesn't it you? How many times do we have a saving God who enters in at what feels like the last moment? At what feels like the moment when we were at our weakest, when we have no power left? Like, think about the story of the sacrifice of Isaac, the binding of Isaac. When does God step in? When Isaac is bound and he's on an altar and a knife is raised over him, when Isaac has nothing left, God says, stop. Right? Nothing left. Okay. When does Hagar, the mother of Ishmael, meet God? She meets God when she's been abused and beaten by Sarah. She's run away into the desert. She's got nobody around. She's got nothing left. She's at her wit's end. And this is when God meets her and speaks to her. She's got nothing left at that point. Okay. When does Lot meet an angel? When his city is about to be destroyed. Paul talks constantly in the New Testament. I've got a thorn in my side. I've prayed over and over and over for God to take the thorn away, but God will not take the thorn away. He's plagued by it over and over and over. Even Jesus prays to be released from a cup that he doesn't want to drink, but God does not take the cup away, right? In 2 Corinthians, Scripture says, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. So Daniel says, when will this happen? It'll happen when you've got nothing left. It'll happen when the power of God's people is finally gone. When you stop relying on your strength, that's when it'll happen. When it's done, when you are done. that's when God does his saving work. When you're done relying on you, when you're done relying on your strength, when you finally accept that it is not about you, but it has always been about God, and is about faithfulness to him and on his strength, that is when the end will come. That's when, Daniel. But God's people consistently and constantly depend on themselves. So it's not time yet. Why is it not time? I'm still building them. Just like they're building the temple, I'm still building them. They're still maturing. And his second question, when will the outcome be? What will the outcome be? And this is the answer. He says, many will be purified and made spotless and refined, but the wicked will continue being wicked. None of the wicked will understand, but those who are wise will understand. That is a tough word. Some will be made whole and some will be made righteous. Some will be refined. How all that happens is probably a way different sermon. It's a different Sunday school class. The flip side is this, though. Those who act wickedly, those who disturb the shalom that God created and gave to us, that put in this place, that is in this earth, they're going to continue to do that thing. They're going to continue to disturb that shalom because they don't understand. They don't understand that God has given a shalom, that has put a shalom in this place, that God made this world for shalom, for prospering, for peace. They don't understand that God made you and I in his image for flourishing. That we are to better one another, not consume one another. And because they don't understand that, because they don't see that, because they don't know that, they will continue down a path of wickedness and consumption. They don't perceive, they don't pay attention, they don't discern, and so they will not be purified and refined. They will not be raised to righteousness, but instead to condemnation. And that is a hard, painful word, because they too have been made in the image of God. And if that doesn't break your heart, you need to do work in your heart. At the end of chapter 12, verse 13, the angel addresses Daniel directly and says, you, Daniel, go to your rest. Go to your rest. It's like saying to an old man, Daniel, it's okay. It's okay to go. Daniel, you can rest because when you wake, you will rise to your inheritance. We can feel a sense of peace for Daniel. Like, well done, my good and faithful servant. You will wake and you will shine like the stars, Daniel. And that's 12. 12's hard, but you can understand why 12 would give Daniel a stomachache too. Because how many people does Daniel know that may fit the picture of those who disturb the shalom? How many kings that loved Daniel? We talked about this in our stories of Daniel. There are kings that love Daniel. How many of them would fit disturbers of the shalom that are wicked, that do not add to the shalom, that will not be raised to righteousness, that Daniel may have loved dearly? The question I think that I'm left with, and we're left with every time that I try to encourage you to wrestle with, is what do we do in our lives? How do we apply it to today? 11 should encourage us to take 12 seriously, because 11's full of so many details that we can look back with our goggles and go, man, that's accurate. So because of that, we should look at 12 and go, man, how do I not take 12 seriously? So what's 12 saying? 12 is describing a worldwide hardship that leads to God saving his followers. There's a great resurrection. Those who are righteous are saved. Those who break God's shalom are not saved. But is that new information to us this morning? That was the thing that I asked myself as I processed through 11 and 12, as I wrote this sermon. The question I asked is that new information? Because it's a hard word. I don't want to give that message to anyone, right? It shouldn't be new information. It shouldn't be. In Matthew 25, Jesus talks about a time when the Son of Man will come with all of his angels in all of his glory. He'll gather all the nations before him, and he will separate all the people like sheep and goats. And the people to him will look as different as when we look at sheep and goats. We don't get them mixed up. Two different animals, right? They don't look the same. It's like elephants and giraffes. They don't look the same, okay? Just like in Daniel, when we see the resurrection happen, some people will shine like stars and some people won't. Clear, okay? Are you understanding what Jesus is saying? Sheep and goats? It's not meant to call names. He will see clearly. Some people will look one way and some people will look the other to him. And he will look at all of the nations and he will separate them into two categories. Some will go on his right and some will go on his left. And those on the right are blessed and those on the left are condemned. And what is the difference? What is the measurement that is used to determine who's in and who's out that Jesus uses when he does the separation? Matthew 25 says these words. I was hungry and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger and you needed me. I was a stranger and you invited me in. I needed clothes and you clothed me. I was sick and you looked after me. I was in prison and you came to visit me. This is the metric that Jesus uses when he does the separation. And there are even people in the group that are saved and they go, wait, we never saw you. When did we do that? And Jesus says to them, whatever you did for the least of these, for the least people that you encountered, for the most wretched people, that's what he means, that you encountered, you did that for me. That is why I put you aside and I am holding on to you. That's why I'm saving you. The condemned group, those on the left, and the reason they're put in that group is because they failed to do those very things. That's it. And I'm not trying to oversimplify this. I'm not trying to dumb anything down. It's just that we tend to make things so complicated. Look at what is written by John in 1 John 3. He says, don't be like Cain, who belonged to the evil one and murdered his brother. And why did he murder him? Because his own actions were evil and his brothers were righteous. This is how we know what love is. Jesus Christ laid down his life for us, and we ought to lay down our lives for our brother and sister. If anyone has material possessions and sees a brother or sister in need, but has no pity on them, how can the love of God be in that person? Dear children, let us not love with words or speech, but with actions and in truth. One of the things that we know in the New Testament is that Jesus boils it down very simply. He says, love the Lord your God and love your neighbor as yourself. And as the writers, the apostles, the followers of Jesus that were his disciples that become apostles and write the scriptures, as they continue writing, they keep making it simpler. They go, hey, if you want to love God, love your neighbor. By loving your neighbor, you're loving God. So if we're to do something with Daniel chapter 12, if we're to be people who are mature enough to understand it, mature enough to actually allow it to impact us, mature enough to use it, and then not put it away for the future. Because that's really the command of the angel. If you're not mature enough to understand it, if you're not mature enough to use it, put it away for a generation that is mature enough to use it. So if we're mature enough to let it hit us, if we're mature enough to use it, then we need to let it motivate us to do something right now, right here, today. And that is to love God by loving my neighbor. If I want to be raised to righteousness, if I want to shine like the stars when the day comes that happens, then I love my neighbor not just with words or speech, but especially with actions and in truth. When they're in need, I meet the need if I'm able to do so. Because who gave me the ability to meet the need but God himself? And when I meet the need of my brother and sister, I am loving them as if I am loving myself. And by loving my neighbor, I am loving God. I am loving them as Jesus would love them. And when the end comes, as it will for us all, I can be assured that I have loved God well. I can be assured that I have been placed on the right side. I can be assured that I will be raised with righteousness, shining like the stars, being told, well done, my good and faithful servant. Being assured that I have not overcomplicated a message that Jesus intended to be so simple. Love God and love your neighbor. John said, this is how we know that we belong to the truth, and how we set our hearts at rest in his presence. If anyone has material possessions and sees a brother or sister in need, but has no pity on them, how can the love of God be in that person? Dear children, let us not love with words or speech, but with actions and in truth.
Hi, this is Pastor Nick. Thanks for listening. I hope something that you heard today was very helpful. If you want to connect with us further, feel free to check us out on Facebook, Instagram, or our website, KanoiChurch.org. Sure, I'm glad we're in this together.